everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Jessica Ward King, the StigmaCrusher here. Today I want to... What was that? Oh yeah. No, just kidding. I want to talk about memory. Memory is... I almost didn't want to do this video because memory is a sore spot for me. I have a terrible memory. And part of the terribleness of that memory is due to the depression that I struggle with as part of my bipolar disorder. Part of that terribleness is due to the electroconvulsive therapy that I underwent when I was younger. Even though there is no conclusive evidence that it causes ongoing memory impairment, I firmly believe that mine is partly due to that, though there is no evidence. And potentially part of my memory impairment is caused by other things, who knows? But I know that part of my memory impairment is due to my mental illness. And this causes me no end of anxiety and angst because it is with me on a daily basis. And so today I want to talk a little bit about what kind of memory impairment you see with depression specifically, and if there's anything you can do about it. So let's begin. So we know that there is a memory deficit or impairment that comes with major depressive disorder, and that's the same kind of depressive disorder as comes with bipolar disorder. And it's really only just being researched in the last couple of decades, and really only just coming to light what kinds of memory deficits we are seeing with depression. Even though we know that there are memory deficits, and yes, I say deficits. There's more than one. So the first one that we see is that people with depression often have a very general memory. So they can remember vacation, and that they vacationed in Maui, for example, and that there was sun and sand maybe. But they can't remember specifics of the vacation, that meal that they had on the beach in Maui, and how it tasted, and how the lobster was so good, and how it ran down their arms. They won't recall these things for you. They won't recall, for example, specifics of, I don't know, of anything really, of a date that they've had, or of even a book that they've read. It's specifics that they don't tend to recall. They tend to recall more general things, which is very problematic when you are trying to, for example, give a report at the office, and all you can remember are the general things that you read and not the specifics. Going along with that, I suppose, is the difficulty in planning things in advance. So like remembering to do things that you've planned in advance. So, for example, you can't remember to take your pills. You can't remember that you planned to take your pills. Which is obviously very difficult for people that are struggling with a mental illness that decide to take medications to treat that mental illness. You need to be able to take those medications on a regular basis, and if you can't remember to take those medications, that's very detrimental to your treatment plan. But it's not just medications, right? You can't remember planning to do a variety of things. You can't remember planning the route to take to your destination. You can't remember planning anything. So those are some of the first that come to mind of the specific detriments to memory with depression that are very, very cumbersome in daily life. So People that are in a typical cohort tend to have a positive bias in memory. We tend to remember positive things much more strongly and recall negative things much less strongly. People who are depressed, on the other hand, have the opposite effect. They recall things that are negative much, much more strongly and things that are positive much less strongly. And that's not because they're remembering the things that are negative more strongly themselves. It's because that positive bias is much less strong with people that are depressed. And it's interesting because that bias goes away as soon as the depression lifts. And so you see this cognitive effect reverse itself once the neuropsychological effect of the depression reverses itself. It's quite an interesting effect to see. So why might these effects on memory happen in depression? One theory has to do a little bit with stress and a little bit with the brain. So the brain aspect is the hippocampus. The hippocampus is a region of the brain that is strongly implicated in memory, specifically the kind of short-term memory that we are talking about here. And it is really highly sensitive to stress. We know that stress and depression are highly linked, that depression is really, really highly sensitive to stress, and stress is really, really implicated in depression. So we think, or at least one of the theories is, that the smaller the hippocampus is, the more the brain is allowed to ruminate. And rumination is thinking over and over the same thing again, is linked to depression. The hippocampus being smaller in depression and that rumination being linked to depression, it's kind of like this self-linking, I guess, I was going to say self-fulfilling prophecy, but it's not a prophecy, it's a brain area. But in any case, it's like they're linked together. So the hippocampus is small, which is linked to the rumination. The rumination is linked to the depression. The depression is linked to the small hippocampus. And it's interesting because the small hippocampus is actually, it shows up in people who are relatives of people with depression who themselves don't yet have depression. Those people have small hippocampus, and then they go on potentially to have depression. It's kind of this reinforcing cycle of small hippocampus, rumination, depression, and repeat, right? So that's one theory, and just because it fits doesn't mean it's right. But it's one theory, and it's one that's really interesting to me because it's been shown that people that have had electroconvulsive therapy, like myself, have reduced hippocampal volumes as a result of the ECT, and there's one theory that any memory impairment as a result of ECT might be linked to that hippocampus reduction. So that's something that's interesting to me, but it is just one theory. So that brings us to, what can we do about this? Well, the bad news is that not a whole lot. Science is still at the point of, what is this? Why is this happening? And not so much at the point of, what are we going to do about this? There are neurocognitive theories about how you can train your brain and how you can help improve your memory from a dementia standpoint, but from a depression standpoint, there are not a lot of really well accepted theories that are kind of going out there and gaining a lot of traction. what we do need to do is really normalize this. So this is one of the symptoms of depression that is not a lot talked about. And so when you kind of go somewhere and say like, oh, that's just my depression brain talking, people look at you like, what do you mean? And if you try to explain, well, it's just the memory impairment due to my impression, people look even more confused. And I think we need to normalize that memory impairment is a part of depression, and explain to people and really educate people as to what kind of memory impairment they might expect to have as a part of their depression, so that it's not so frightening and not so foreign, and people aren't left, wondering, am I normal? Am I literally, people thinking to themselves, am I just going crazy? When the answer is, of course not. You're having symptoms of a psychiatric condition. But it's a natural conclusion to come to, that there's something not right when you have symptoms that you aren't aware are a normal part of the disorder that you're experiencing. And so this is something that we really need to educate people about, get that word out about, before we can really start to treat people for it, and figure out, how we can make this better. So that's the bad news. I'm sorry if you were along with me, following along this video, going, what's she going to come to in the end? That's the bad news. But the good news is you can do something to help. You can share this video, get the word out, tell your friends, let them know that mental illness can come along with memory impairment, and depression in particular. So that's it for this week. I hope you're having a great week, and take care of yourselves. I'll see you in my next one. Bye.
StigmaCrusher.